The shuttle doors opened and Rillian stepped onto Earth for the first time. The gravity hit her like a punch to the chest. Her legs wobbled, her spine compressed. Every step felt like walking through thick mud. She was Valorian, born on the gentle world of Seraphis where gravity was kind and weather was soft. Her people were tall and slender, with pale blue skin and large, dark eyes built for their planet's dim sunlight. They had evolved without predators, without storms, without any of the countless horrors that other species faced. When the Galactic Cadet Exchange Program opened applications, Rillian had volunteered immediately. Humans were the newest species in the galactic community, barely a century into space travel. How hard could their training be? They were practically primitive. This would be an easy cultural experience, maybe some light exercise and diplomatic seminars. That was what she had told herself. A human female in crisp uniform approached her. The woman was short by Valorian standards, barely reaching Rillian's shoulder, but she moved with a confidence that seemed too large for her body. "Cadet Rillian," the woman extended her hand. "Sergeant Davis, welcome to Terran Military Academy." Rillian had studied human customs. She shook the hand, surprised by the strength in those small fingers. "Thank you for having me, Sergeant. I'm honored to participate in this exchange." Sergeant Davis smiled. It was a warm smile, but something in her eyes made Rillian's stomach tighten. It was the look of someone who knew a secret. "You'll be joining 12 other exchange cadets this term. We're excited to have you all." Davis began walking, and Rillian struggled to keep pace in the heavy gravity. "Your orientation packet has all the details. Welcome week begins at 400 tomorrow." Rillian did not know what 400 meant, but she nodded politely. The academy grounds spread before her, nestled in what humans called the Pacific Northwest. Green trees stretched toward a gray sky. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks white with something Rillian later learned was frozen water. The air smelled strange, thick with oxygen and moisture and 1,000 organic compounds her body did not recognize. It looked peaceful enough. Then she saw them. A group of human cadets ran past in formation, their boots pounding against wet ground. Water fell from the sky in sheets, what humans apparently called light rain. The cadets wore heavy packs on their backs and thick clothing that clung to their bodies. They were soaking wet, covered in mud, and clearly exhausted. They were also laughing. "Why are they doing that?" Rillian asked, her voice small. "Morning run," Davis said casually. "Gets the blood flowing." In the water falling from the sky. "Rain builds character," Davis's smile widened. "Don't worry, you'll get used to it." Rillian's first regret began forming in her chest. The dormitory was a simple building made of concrete and metal. Rillian found her assigned room on the 3rd floor. Inside, another alien was already unpacking. This one was short and wide, with gray-brown skin that looked like stone. His species was called Gretian, and his name was Pollux. "You look as terrified as I feel," Pollux said by way of greeting. "I was told this would be a cultural exchange," Rillian replied, sitting heavily on her assigned bed. The mattress was thin and firm. "They mentioned physical activities. They did not mention running through falling water." "I spoke to a Meyerlian in the shuttle. He said his cousin did this program last year." Pollux's rocky face somehow managed to look pale. "His cousin spent a week in the wilderness eating insects." "Surely that is an exaggeration." "The Meyerlian's cousin now works as a combat instructor on their homeworld. He said Earth changed him." Rillian looked at her orientation packet. She had not read the full program description before volunteering. She had assumed it would be similar to Valorian officer training, which consisted mostly of strategic simulations and diplomatic protocols with light physical conditioning. She opened the packet and began reading. Her second regret arrived quickly. The schedule listed activities like close quarters combat training and hostile environment survival and weapons qualification. There were mentions of something called stress inoculation and endurance testing. The welcome letter cheerfully explained that humans believed in preparing for worst-case scenarios. Their training philosophy was built on the idea that comfort was the enemy of readiness. Cadets would be pushed beyond their limits so they could discover what they were truly capable of. "They want to break us," Pollux said, reading over her shoulder. "They want to build us," Rillian corrected, though she did not feel convinced. That night she could not sleep. The gravity pressed down on her. Strange sounds came from outside, insects and wind and the settling of this ancient, heavy world. Somewhere in the distance, she heard human cadets singing as they ran through the darkness. She thought about requesting immediate transfer back to Seraphis. She could claim a medical condition. Her species was not built for this planet. No one would blame her. But something held her back. Pride, perhaps, or curiosity, or the simple fact that she had told everyone back home how brave she was to volunteer for this assignment. At some point, exhaustion won. She drifted into uncomfortable sleep. It felt like only minutes later when the pounding started. Fists hammered against doors up and down the hallway. Voices shouted loud enough to shake the walls. Lights flared to painful brightness. "Rise and shine, cadets. Welcome week starts now. You have 5 minutes to dress and report outside. Move, move, move." Rillian looked at Pollux. Pollux looked at Rillian. Outside, rain was still falling from the dark sky. Her third regret of many settled into her bones as she stumbled out of bed, and somewhere in the back of her mind, she wondered if she would survive long enough to collect them all. Rillian had never been so cold, so wet, or so confused about why anyone would choose this life voluntarily. The first morning began in darkness. She stood in a line with dozens of other cadets, aliens and humans mixed together, while rain hammered down from the black sky. Instructors walked up and down the rows, shouting words of encouragement that sounded more like threats. "Today is an easy day," one instructor bellowed. "We are being gentle because you are new. Enjoy it while it lasts." If this was gentle, Rillian did not want to experience harsh. The 5-mile run nearly killed her. Valorian lungs were not designed for Earth's thick atmosphere. Valorian legs were not designed for Earth's crushing gravity. She fell behind almost immediately, her breath coming in desperate gasps, her muscles burning with an unfamiliar fire. But the humans would not let her quit. Her assigned squad surrounded her like a protective wall. There was Cadet Officer Annie Park, a small human female with sharp eyes and a surprisingly kind voice. Diego was tall and brown-skinned, with an easy smile that never seemed to fade. Yusuf was quiet and thoughtful, always watching, always thinking. Bree was the smallest of them all, barely reaching Rillian's chest, but she moved with a fierce energy that made larger beings step aside. "You can do this," Annie said, matching Rillian's slow pace. "One step at a time, don't think about the finish line, just think about the next step." "My legs are failing," Rillian gasped. "Your legs are lying to you. Your brain is telling them to stop because it wants comfort. But your legs have more to give, trust us." Rillian did not understand how her own body could lie to her, but she kept moving. One step, then another, then another. She finished the run dead last, covered in mud and shame, but she finished. "Good job," Diego said, slapping her shoulder in what humans apparently considered a gesture of approval. "Tomorrow you'll be faster. Tomorrow we do this again." All 4 humans laughed. It was not a cruel laugh, but it made Rillian's stomach sink. "Tomorrow we do more," Bree said with a grin. The obstacle course was worse than the run. Rillian had to climb walls that stretched above her head. She had to crawl through tubes filled with cold mud. She had to balance on narrow beams while her exhausted muscles trembled. She had to swim through water that felt like liquid ice. Humans, she learned, did not simply accept discomfort. They created it on purpose. They built entire structures designed to challenge their bodies. They invented new ways to suffer and called it training. "Embrace the suck," Annie told her as Rillian hung from a rope, her arms shaking so badly she could barely hold on. "What does that mean?" It means the suffering is the point. Your body is learning that it can handle more than it thinks. Your mind is learning that discomfort is temporary. When real danger comes, you'll know how to push through. Rillian dropped from the rope, landing badly in the mud below. Every part of her body hurt. "I did not sign up for real danger," she said, struggling to her feet. Annie helped her up, and something in the human's eyes softened. "None of us did. But the universe doesn't care what we signed up for. Better to be ready and never need it than need it and not be ready." That evening, Rillian collapsed onto her thin mattress and stared at the ceiling. Her body felt like it had been taken apart and put back together wrong. Her muscles ached in places she did not know she had muscles. Pollux sat on his own bed, equally destroyed. His rocky skin was cracked with new stress lines. "This was the easy day," he said. "They kept saying this was the easy day." Perhaps they were joking. Humans joke about strange things, but I do not think they were joking about this. Over the following days, Rillian discovered just how serious humans were about their training. Every morning brought new challenges. Running became longer, obstacles became harder, rest periods became shorter. She learned to eat human food, which her body barely tolerated. She learned to function on minimal sleep, which her mind barely accepted. She learned to ignore pain that would have sent her to a medical facility on Seraphis. The other alien cadets struggled alongside her. The Myrlians, amphibious beings from a water world, choked in Earth's dry air. The Gretians, despite their tough bodies, could not handle the temperature swings. The Selvani, delicate insectoids from a low-radiation planet, had to wear special suits to survive Earth's harsh sunlight. But the humans treated them all the same. They pushed the aliens just as hard as they pushed each other. They slowed down when needed, offered help when asked, but they never lowered the standards. On the 7th day, something strange happened. Rillian completed the morning run without falling behind. Her legs still burned. Her lungs still ached. But she kept pace with her squad, and when they crossed the finish line, Annie nodded at her with genuine approval. "Told you," Annie said, "faster every day." That night, Rillian realized she had not thought about quitting in almost 48 hours. The suffering was still there, constant and overwhelming, but somewhere along the way, it had become normal. She did not know if that was a good thing or a terrifying thing. Probably both. The training hall smelled like sweat and old violence. Rillian stood at the edge of the padded floor, watching human cadets throw each other to the ground with terrifying enthusiasm. On Seraphis, conflicts were resolved through debate. Words were weapons. The most respected Valorians were those who could argue their opponents into submission using logic and eloquence. Physical confrontation was considered primitive, something that lesser species did when they lacked the intelligence for better solutions. Humans, apparently, had not received that message. "Everyone fights," Master Sergeant Okonkwo announced. He was a massive, human, dark-skinned and thickly muscled, with a voice that commanded attention without effort. "I don't care what your species does at home. Here you learn to defend yourself. No exceptions." Rillian raised her hand. "Master Sergeant, my people do not engage in physical violence. We have evolved beyond such methods." Okonkwo walked toward her slowly. Despite his size, he moved with a grace that reminded Rillian of predators she had seen in nature documentaries. Her instincts, buried deep from a time before her species had evolved past fear, suddenly woke up and screamed at her to run. "What happens when someone tries to hurt you?" he asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. "What happens when words don't work, when there's no time for debate?" We call for assistance. And if assistance is too far away, if you're alone on a hostile world with beings who don't care about your elegant arguments?" Rillian had no answer. "You don't have to become a warrior," Okonkwo continued. "But you need to know how to survive long enough for help to arrive. That's what we're teaching here, not violence for its own sake, survival." She nodded weakly. "Good, partner up, basic holds first." Rillian was paired with Bree. The small human barely reached her chest, and her arms looked like thin sticks compared to Rillian's long limbs. This should be manageable, Rillian thought. 30 seconds later, she was flat on her back with Bree's knee on her chest. How, Rillian gasped. Leverage, Bree said cheerfully, helping her up. Size doesn't matter as much as knowing where to push and when. Come on, let's try again. This time, bend your knees more. Over the following weeks, Rillian learned things about humans that textbooks had never mentioned. She learned that they had developed hundreds of different ways to hurt each other, entire schools of combat passed down through generations. Some focused on throws, some focused on strikes, some focused on joint locks that could disable an opponent without causing permanent damage. She learned that humans had sports where participants deliberately gave each other brain injuries, and spectators cheered. She learned that their history was soaked in blood, endless wars fought over territory, resources, ideology, and sometimes just pride. She learned that even their games taught violence, children chasing each other and pretending to kill from a young age. Why, she asked. Diego one day, nursing a bruise on her arm where a practice strike had landed. Why does your species focus so much on causing harm? Diego sat beside her, considering the question. Because our world taught us that lesson. Earth is dangerous. Predators hunted our ancestors, weather killed us. Disease wiped out entire populations. We learned early that the universe isn't kind. If we wanted to survive, we had to fight. But you are intelligent now. You have technology. You don't need violence anymore. Tell that to the species that would conquer us if we showed weakness. Diego's voice held no anger, just acceptance. The galaxy is full of beings who take what they want. We've learned that the best way to prevent violence is to be so capable of it that others think twice before starting anything. The weapons training was even more overwhelming. Humans had developed an endless variety of tools designed to kill at range. Projectile weapons, energy weapons, explosive weapons, chemical weapons. Each one was more terrible than the last, and humans maintained them with loving care. The shooting range was a sensory assault. The noise punched through Rillian's ears despite protection. The smell of burnt propellant stung her nose. The vibration of each shot traveled through the floor and into her bones. But the worst part was how casual the humans were about it all. They adjusted their aim with practiced ease. They discussed ammunition types like others might discuss food preferences. They treated these instruments of death as simple tools, extensions of their will, neither good nor evil. Finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire, Yusuf reminded her, gently correcting her grip. Always assume it's loaded, never point it at anything you don't want to destroy. I do not want to destroy anything. Neither do I, Yusuf's voice was soft. But if someone tried to hurt my family, I would, without hesitation. That's what this training is about. Not wanting violence, but being ready for it if violence finds you. By the end of combat training, Rillian could throw a punch that would actually hurt someone. She could break a hold. She could fire a weapon accurately at short range. She was not dangerous by human standards, but she was no longer helpless. Strangely, that knowledge brought her peace. Not because she wanted to hurt anyone, but because she understood now what Okonkwo had meant. The ability. To protect oneself was not about aggression. It was about having options when the worst happened. She still hoped the worst would never come. But if it did, she would be ready. At least more ready than before. The shuttle dropped them in the middle of nowhere and flew away without looking back. Rillian watched it disappear into the gray sky and felt her heart sink into her stomach. 7 days, minimal supplies, no shelter, no cooked food, just the wilderness of Earth and whatever skills they had learned in the past months. Welcome to Survival Week, Annie said, adjusting the small pack on her back. This is where we find out what you're really made of. Rillian looked around at the environment that would be her home for the next 7 days. Dense forests stretched in every direction. The trees were enormous, their branches blocking most of the sunlight. Strange sounds came from the shadows, creatures moving, calling, hunting. Earth, she had finally understood, was not a normal planet. It was what the galactic community classified as a deathworld, a place where conditions were so hostile that intelligent life should never have evolved. High gravity, extreme temperature variations, atmospheric oxygen levels that turned any spark into a potential wildfire, radiation from the sun that could damage cells, an ecosystem filled with predators, parasites, poisons, and 1,000 other ways to die. Humans had not just survived on this world, they had thrived. They had conquered every biome, from frozen wastelands to scorching deserts. They had eaten everything that moved and many things that did not. They had turned a planet that should have killed them into their home. Now Rillian had to survive it for 1 week. The first day was an education in pain. The sun burned her pale blue skin despite the forest cover. Insects discovered that Valorian blood was apparently delicious and swarmed her constantly. Plants brushed against her arms and left itching rashes that lasted for hours. "Don't touch those," Diego said, pointing at innocent-looking leaves. "That's poison ivy. Human skin reacts badly. Alien skin reacts worse." "How do you know which plants are dangerous?" "Experience, and the fact that our ancestors tried eating everything at least once." Diego showed her which plants were safe to eat. Some had berries that provided energy. Some had roots that could be boiled into something almost nutritious. Some were medicine for various ailments. "This one stops bleeding," he explained, crushing leaves between his fingers. "This one reduces fever. This one will make you vomit everything you've eaten in the last day." "Why would anyone want that?" "If you eat something poisonous, getting it out fast might save your life." Annie taught her to build shelter from fallen branches and leaves. The construction was simple but effective, creating a small dry space that blocked wind and retained body heat. Rillian had never built anything with her hands before. On Seraphis, machines handled such work. "Not bad," Annie said, examining Rillian's first attempt. "Tomorrow will teach you how to make it better." On the third day, rain came, not the gentle showers she had experienced at the academy, but a true storm. Lightning cracked across the sky. Thunder shook the ground. Water fell in sheets so thick she could barely see 3 steps ahead. Rillian huddled in her shelter, paralyzed with fear. On Seraphis, weather was controlled. Storms did not exist. This chaos of water and electricity and noise felt like the planet itself was trying to kill her. The humans simply adapted. They reinforced their shelters. They collected rainwater for drinking. They checked on the alien cadets, making sure everyone was safe and as comfortable as possible under the circumstances. Yusuf sat with her through the worst of the storm, talking calmly about nothing in particular. His presence helped. Knowing she was not alone made the terror manageable. On the 4th day, Rillian made a mistake. She stepped wrong on a slippery rock and twisted her ankle. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. She collapsed to the ground, crying out in a language that was neither Valorian nor common. Within seconds, her squad surrounded her. "Let me see," Bree said, carefully examining the injury. "Not broken, probably a sprain. Can you move it?" Rillian tried. Fire shot up her leg. Barely. "We'll need to adjust our plans," Annie said. There was no frustration in her voice, no anger at the inconvenience, just calm problem-solving. "Diego, can you take her pack? Yusuf, find a walking stick. Bree, scout ahead for the easiest path." No one suggested leaving her behind. No one complained about the extra burden. They simply divided her weight among themselves and continued moving. "You should go faster without me," Rillian protested. "We don't." "Leave people behind," Diego said, as if explaining something obvious to a child. That's not negotiable." For the next 3 days, her squad carried her through the wilderness. They took turns supporting her weight. They chose paths that were easier on her ankle. They stopped more frequently to let her rest. At night, they kept watch in shifts while the aliens slept. Rillian woke once to see Annie staring into the darkness, a weapon ready, eyes scanning for threats. "Go back to sleep," Annie whispered. "Nothing's getting past me." On the 7th day, the extraction shuttle appeared in the sky. Rillian looked up at it and felt tears streaming down her face. Pollux, who had handled the weak better than most thanks to his rock-like body, patted her shoulder awkwardly. "Happy tears?" he asked. Rillian nodded, unable to speak. The humans thought she was celebrating survival, and she was, but she was also crying because she finally understood something important. Humans were not dangerous because they could survive anything. They were dangerous because they refused to survive alone. And somehow, impossibly, they had decided she was one of them. The evaluation report glowed on the screen, numbers and ratings arranged in neat columns that felt like a list of her failures. Rillian sat in her quarters, staring at the evidence of her inadequacy. Physical fitness, lowest in program. Combat proficiency, below minimum standards. Survival skills, marginally acceptable. Overall ranking, bottom 5%. She had been at the academy for 4 months. She had worked harder than she had ever worked in her life. She had pushed her body past every limit she thought it had, and she was still failing. On Seraphis, she had been exceptional, top of her academic class, praised for her analytical abilities, recommended for diplomatic service by her instructors. She had never failed at anything that mattered. Now she could not even do a proper push-up. The bag was already half-packed when Annie knocked on the door. "Thought I might find you here," Annie said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. Humans did that, Rillian had learned. They assumed they were welcome until told otherwise. "Going somewhere." "Home," Rillian did not look up from her packing. "I am requesting transfer back to Seraphis. My body is not designed for this. I will never meet your standards. There is no point in continuing." Annie sat on the edge of the bed, quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than Rillian had ever heard it. "Did I ever tell you I almost quit my first year?" Rillian finally looked up. "You." "Me couldn't do a single pull-up when I started, came in last in every run, cried myself to sleep for the first 3 weeks. Annie smiled at the memory. "My father was military, his father was military. Everyone expected me to be a natural. I wasn't. I was terrible. But you are one of the best cadets in our class now." "Because I didn't quit," Annie shrugged. "The academy breaks everyone down, that's the point. It finds your weaknesses and attacks them until you either overcome them or give up. Most beings who give up regret it later. Most beings who give up probably feel relief. For a while, then they spend the rest of their lives wondering what might have happened if they had stayed." Annie stood and walked to the window. "You know what I see when I look at you, Rillian? I see someone who finished a 5-mile run in an atmosphere that should have suffocated her. I see someone who climbed an obstacle wall that was designed for humans, not Valorians. I see someone who survived 7 days in an environment that was literally trying to kill her. I came last in everything. So you finished. A lot of beings in this galaxy never even try." Annie turned back to her. "The question isn't whether you're the best. The question is whether you're better than you were yesterday. And you are. Every single day you're better than you were before." Rillian said nothing. The words settled into her chest, mixing with the weight of failure that had accumulated there. "Besides," Annie continued, "you're giving up before the good part, the part where all this suffering actually pays off." "What good part?" Annie grinned. "Come with me, I want to show you something." They walked through the academy grounds, past training facilities and dormitories, until they reached the administrative building. Annie led her to a room filled with holographic displays showing incident reports from across the galaxy. "These are after-action reviews from the past 10 years, Annie explained. "Every mission where beings with academy training were involved. Watch this." The displays shifted to show statistics. Survival rates, mission success rates, casualty numbers. Beings trained at Terran Military Academy had a survival rate nearly double the galactic average. They completed missions that others abandoned. They brought their teammates home alive when everything went wrong. "We're not trying to torture you," Annie said quietly. "We're trying to save your life. Someday, somewhere, you're going to face a situation where everything depends on what you learned here, and when that day comes, you'll be glad you stayed. Rillian stared at the numbers. She thought about the survival week, how her squad had carried her without complaint. She thought about combat training, how Bree had patiently taught her to throw a punch. She thought about every morning run where humans had slowed down to stay with her. They were not just training bodies here, they were building something else. A bond, a trust, a willingness to suffer for each other. "If I stay," Rillian said slowly, "I will need help. My body cannot do what human bodies can. I need a different approach." "Then we'll find one," Annie smiled. "I already talked to the others. Diego thinks we can modify your strength training to focus on flexibility instead of raw power. Yusuf has ideas about adjusting your running technique. Bree wants to teach you a combat style that uses your reach advantage." "You discussed this before speaking to me." "We're a squad. Your problems are our problems." Annie shrugged as if this was the most obvious thing in the world. "So, are you staying?" Rillian looked at the half-packed bag on her bed. She looked at the evaluation report still glowing on her screen. She looked at Annie, this small human who had taken time from her own training to chase down a failing alien and convince her not to give up. "I will stay," Rillian said, "but I reserve the right to regret it every single day." Annie laughed. "That's the spirit. Now put your stuff away. Evening run starts in 20 minutes. Rillian groaned but started unpacking. She still did not believe she could succeed. But for the first time since arriving on this terrible, wonderful, dangerous world, she believed she could try. 6 months had passed since Rillian had almost packed her bags and fled home to Seraphis. 6 months of modified training, adjusted expectations, and relentless effort. 6 months of pain that slowly transformed into something else entirely. The final evaluation started at dawn. First came the obstacle course. Rillian approached the towering walls and muddy pits with focus instead of fear. Her squad had spent countless hours helping her develop techniques that worked for her Valorian body. Where humans used raw strength, she used momentum. Where they powered through obstacles, she flowed around them. She was not fast, she would never be fast, but she made it over every wall, through every tunnel, across every beam. When she crossed the finish line, her lungs burning and her muscles screaming, the instructor nodded approval. "Pass," he said. One word, the most beautiful word she had ever heard. Combat evaluation came next. She faced a human opponent twice her mass, a final-year cadet who moved like water and struck like stone. Rillian knew she could not win. That was not the point. The point was to survive long enough to demonstrate competence. She used her reach, keeping distance. She used her flexibility, bending away from strikes that would have flattened her months ago. When her opponent closed in, she executed a throw that Bree had taught her, using leverage and timing instead of strength. She still lost, but she lost after 3 minutes of sustained combat, and when she tapped out, she was still conscious and relatively undamaged. "Pass," the instructor said. The survival test was 48 hours alone in the wilderness. No squad to carry her this time. No humans to keep watch while she slept. Just Rillian and the deadly beauty of Earth. She built a shelter that kept out the rain. She found water and purified it. She identified plants that would nourish her and avoided plants that would kill her. She treated a small cut on her hand before it could become infected. She slept in short intervals, always aware, never fully vulnerable. When the extraction shuttle arrived, she was hungry, exhausted, and covered in insect bites. But she was alive. "Pass." The graduation ceremony took place in the main hall, a vast space filled with beings from across the galaxy. Families attended virtually, their faces projected on screens around the room. Valorian faces watched from Seraphis. Human faces watched from Earth's colonies. Gretian faces watched from their stony homeworld. Rillian sat with her squad, surrounded by beings who had started as strangers and become something she did not have words for. Not quite friends, not quite family, something uniquely human that they had shared with her. When her turn came to speak, She walked to the podium on legs that no longer trembled in Earth's gravity. She looked out at the assembled cadets, humans and aliens together, and found words she had not planned. When I arrived on this planet, I regretted my decision immediately, and every day after that, the gravity crushed me, the weather attacked me, the training pushed me past every limit I thought I had. Laughter rippled through the crowd. The alien cadets nodded in understanding. I wanted to quit. I almost did quit, but my squad would not let me. They slowed down when I could not keep up. They carried me when I could not walk. They believed in me when I did not believe in myself. She looked at Annie, Diego, Yusuf, and Bree. They smiled back at her. Humans call themselves deathworlders, and they are. This planet should have killed their ancestors. Instead, it made them strong. Strong enough to face anything. Strong enough to help others become strong too. Rillian straightened her spine, standing as tall as her aching body allowed. I still regret coming here. I will probably always regret it, but I would do it again, because what I gained is worth more than what I suffered. I learned that I am capable of more than I knew. I learned that true strength is not about size or speed or power. It is about refusing to give up and refusing to leave others behind. She paused, gathering her final thoughts. I am Valorian. My people resolve conflicts with words. But now, if words fail, I can protect myself and others. That is what the humans taught me. That is what I will carry with me for the rest of my life. She returned to her seat to applause that thundered through the hall. After the ceremony, Master Sergeant Okonkwo found her. He pressed something into her hand, a patch bearing the emblem of her squad. You earned this, he said. You're one of them now. Wherever you go, whatever you do, you carry what we taught you. Use it well. Rillian clutched the patch and felt tears threatening. Thank you, Master Sergeant. He smiled, and for a moment the massive warrior looked almost gentle. Thank yourself. We just showed you the path. You're the one who walked it. Hours later, Rillian stood at the academy entrance, watching a new shuttle land. Fresh exchange cadets emerged, blinking in the sunlight, looking around with the same hopeful ignorance she had worn 6 months ago. A Valorian was among them, tall and slender, with wide, dark eyes full of naive excitement. Rillian walked toward the group and smiled, the same knowing smile Sergeant Davis had given her on her first day. Welcome to Terran Military Academy, she said. I'm Cadet Rillian. I'll be helping with your orientation. The new Valorian beamed. This is so exciting. I have heard wonderful things about the exchange program. Rillian's smile widened slightly. It's quite an experience. Welcome week starts at 400 tomorrow. Make sure you get plenty of sleep tonight. Why, what happens tomorrow? Rillian patted the newcomer's shoulder with genuine sympathy and began walking toward the dormitories. You're going to regret this, she said over her shoulder, and then you're going to be grateful, trust me. Behind her, rain began to fall. Perfect, she thought. They might as well start learning now.